Should you borrow money to buy precious metals? After all, we borrow a lot of money to buy the houses that we live in, and that is not too dissimilar to a precious metal investment over a long period of time. But there are a lot of risks and downsides to over-leveraging yourself when buying precious metals. So today I want to talk about that and some of the do's and don'ts of buying silver on credit. Hello everybody, Backyard Bullion here, and a very warm welcome to you all joining me for this week's Precious Metal Ramble, where I want to talk about buying precious metals on credit or taking a loan out to buy your silver and gold. Now, I am very much against this idea, but I do concede that there are potential circumstances where actually it might make some sense. I do want to caveat that by saying that this is in no means any kind of financial advice video, and indeed if you do see any random person here on YouTube saying you should go out and borrow money, put it all on a credit card, or just take out a big loan from the bank to buy precious metals, to really open your eyes and understand that that's not necessarily the right thing to do. Now, I do want to say that buying precious metals on a credit card is different to borrowing money to buy precious metals. If you are buying those precious metals on that credit card and you're paying that credit card off before any interest kicks in, then it's exactly the same as buying it on any kind of debit card, and you have a really, really enhanced level of protection as a consumer for that. So that's a distinct difference which I want to draw on right now. But if you go over and above what you can afford to repay on that credit card, each month you're going to be accruing extra interest, and that essentially just means that your precious metals cost you more money and that you're leveraged. And the leverage here is the big thing. If you are unable to meet the repayments, if you're unable to pay back the debts and the loan that you take out to buy silver, then you're relying on other income and other sources of funding to basically pay off that interest, that debt. You don't really truly own what you own. Now, I've seen a couple of what I will basically just say are conspiracy theories out there, that because the dollar is in an eventual decline and it's going to collapse and your money's going to inflate away to nothing, that if you borrow $10,000 right now today, then in 50 years, or it's not 50 years, in 5 years' time, with the dollar being collapsed, that $10,000 will be next to worthless because of inflation and collapse of the dollar. And now's the time. Get in while you can. Convert it to silver and preserve that wealth. No, I think that's just, you guys who've been following my channel for a long time, you know that I don't believe in that kind of collapse system. I don't think that's going to happen. And I really think that's setting yourself up for a monumental failure. Certainly if you are able to somehow get borrowing way above and beyond what you can afford, which sadly happens a lot more often than people care to admit. Now, from another perspective, though, an interesting one here. So, I'm basically advocating here, don't borrow to buy precious metals. Don't borrow to hedge your money across the rest of your lifetime or even just into the short-term future. However, that is exactly what the vast majority of people on this planet, 99% of people on the planet will have to do to own their own home. Buying a house with a mortgage is essentially the same as buying precious metals, but having it then over a long period of time, your 25-year period or 30, 40-year mortgage lifetime. So is there a fundamental difference there? Can you just take a mortgage out and buy a bunch of silver with it? I've said a few times on my channel that silver and gold can sometimes act like a miniature little property. You can get that same kind of wealth protection from bricks and mortar as you can from precious metals. So surely borrowing money on the scale of a mortgage to buy your precious metals is a good idea, a good hedge. Well, there are a couple of fundamental flaws in that argument. The first being that when you buy a bunch of precious metals straight from a big dealer, for example, and you're buying it, the premiums that dealers will be charging, selling it back quickly is going to be the problem. And unless you're going for gold, then silver is going to really be super high risk because you'll be buying at whatever the premium might be for you guys in the US, it can be as low as a few dollars over spot, or it can be as high as $10 over spot. For us in the UK, it's huge premiums over spot price, with the VAT and sales tax included. So from that perspective, it is an absolute recipe for disaster, because if you lose your job and you can't afford the repayments, if you've got medical issues and you can't work or something like that, then you are suddenly going to be stuck with this large wodge of silver, which essentially boils down to what is known as negative equity. Now that can happen in housing markets, and I remember when growing up, I didn't know a great deal about it, but I knew that my parents had bought a house and then it had drastically reduced in price because of the stupid markets at that time when I was growing up, and they were essentially forced into staying where they wanted to be in this tiny little poxy house. A wonderful place to grow up, but tiny little house. And it's just one of those things you have to kind of grin and bear it. Now, if you've got a mortgage, at least with a house, you've got somewhere to live, and that's fantastic. But if you've just got a bunch of silver and you can't then afford your mortgage payments, or you can't afford the loan payments on your silver and gold, that's where you're in trouble. And that is the key moment here. It's about managing the risk going forward into the future. And mortgages are very different to mortgages to buy houses are very different than borrowing money against your house to buy silver. That is, in my opinion, one of the most silly things that anybody could possibly do if they wanted to look to get into silver or gold. Gold is less risky, I'll give people that, but buying a bunch of silver with a loan against your house is just a recipe for disaster. As we've seen this year, there has been a drastic reduction in the silver's price, and a lot of people expected and wanted it to go up. And I would not be surprised if there are a bunch of people who are sitting on very expensive silver that they're probably still financing through loans, through credit card payments, because they got caught up in hype. And that's quite sad to see, and that's also very risky. And it has a follow-on effect as well, not just having sort of risk about being forced to sell. That's one of the bad things, of course, being over-leveraged and then losing out when you don't choose to sell something. But not being able to take advantage of other potential opportunities that happen in life. In terms of investments, or perhaps even having a holiday, or helping relatives if there are people who are in trouble and you need to actually produce the goods to help them. Not being able to do that, not having that reserve safety net, that fund to really dig in when things get tough, is just a recipe for disaster. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that borrowing money to buy precious metals is a bad idea. Now, that can also be countered by a phrase that I've used in the past called front loading. Now, if you perhaps are secure, and I mean, as secure as anybody can be in a job these days, I know that times are very different to where they were even 10, 15 years ago, with jobs being very much less secure. You see big companies, big firms going up bust all the time, and people losing their jobs when they didn't expect it. But if you have a job which you think is pretty secure, or an income which you think is pretty secure, and you're just new to precious metals, I will concede there is this potential argument for putting as much money as you can into precious metals right now. It's called front loading. It's buying all of that kind of stack up front in one go, rather than hedging it over time. If you are expecting and wanting silver price to go up over a next 5-year period, then it's a slow gradual increase. You might as well just buy it all right now. Now, a lot of people might just have savings to use that for. That is what I would say is the most important thing, rather than going and borrowing money. But again, if you're at a position in life where things are stable, things are secure, and you've got this potential, I will concede that it is an idea to look into. What I will say very much right now, though, is that it is risky. It is not something to go into lightly. And if anything, I would say go and actually do some proper financial advice work with a qualified advisor to look at those options. Because essentially it is the same as borrowing money for a business, or borrowing money for any investments and things like that. And it is interesting, but it is incredibly risky, and it's not something I would recommend to people. I put a case study in point here about my poured silver business. So when I started pouring silver here on YouTube, it was very much as a hobby. It was something like, I was like, Hi-Ho Silver's done that, Losing Louie's done that. I want to copy them. I want to do something that's cool. I want to make something unique that's different for me. And, if I could sell them to make it a self-sustaining hobby, then great. And when I turned to Mrs. Backyard Bullion and said that I wanted to do all of this, she was What's the best phrase? Skeptical at best, I think, is probably the best phrase to use here. She raised a wry eyebrow in my direction. But she said that if I wanted to do this as a little self-sustaining hobby business, then I could put a little business plan together and she would essentially front the money. Now, of course, I had my own money and my own savings, but she wanted me to treat it like it was a business, to make sure that I understood that this was not just a little, a folly adventure to waste some money on. So I put a little plan together and she gave me a little budget of £2,000 to buy the raw material, to buy all the equipment and to go from there. And she said, once you've got some money come back in, you can roll that over and you can go to your heart's content and it will be a self-sustaining hobby. And things then snowballed over the next 2 years and we are now where we are with this wonderful job. It's not even a job, this job that I do. But the point here is that a lot of people could have leveraged themselves too far. For me, it was really interesting, and I've got a sort of business management background and economics background as well, and I really enjoyed that process of building that budget, building that business, building that plan to go forwards. And it does make me look at other, I've met loads of different business people with loads of different businesses, with loads of different outlooks and approaches on different ways of working. And a lot of them will, borrow a lot of money to get started, and they essentially won't be profitable for 5-10 years even sometimes, depending on their business. And it is interesting to see that. So, if you are looking at silver as a business investment, if you want to set yourself up as a bullion dealer, you're going to need capital for doing that, and it's sometimes a very risky game. That said, it's an industry where you at least have a silver lining, and I love the fact that we can use that phrase in an actual context. If you are doing a silver business, if you're working up to become a silver producer or a sort of retailer of coins, or even doing poured silver, if you buy a bunch of the poured silver granules, the silver shot, it will have inherent value. If you're doing other things like building toys, or you basically plastic printing or something like that, and you're buying sheets and sheets of plastic or beads of plastic to melt down into various different things, you are going to be nowhere close to any kind of recovery price if you needed to sell all of this. And one of the great things about the poured silver business for me, and any kind of bullion business, is that their stock that they've got left over, the stock that is not being sold, that is just sitting there on their books, is inherently valuable. It'll go up, it'll go down, but it will hold some value there, and that's a good safety net. So there are more risky things to borrow money to do in terms of business, in terms of life, investing. Whether you should is, in my opinion, down to everybody's individual circumstances. I personally would advocate never borrowing. I always have been, in fact, in my whole life, against borrowing money to buy things. I want to be debt free. I want to be as debt free as possible. There are certain things in life that you can't avoid in terms of debt, and if you want somewhere nice to live, that's you can't, as a young person, expect to have enough cash to buy a property outright. It's just unobtainable for everybody. But in terms of things like buying a phone, buying the latest phones, the gadgets, the cars, I buy second-hand cars. I just drive an old clapped out Ford. It's 2007 reg, so it's 16 years old now, and it's just a right old banger. But it goes and it passes its MOT, car safety test, every year, and it's just fine. So I don't need a fancy car. I don't need to have the latest phone with a £50 a month phone bill. It's just about managing your finances, and all of that money that you'll save by not borrowing money to get all of the latest mod cons will actually end up buying you more of this stuff overall. So that's my kind of non-financial advice, opinion-based argument for why borrowing money to buy precious metals isn't necessarily a great idea. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. That's why I make these kind of videos, to get the juices of the brain flowing. And if you have any thoughts, comments, then please let me know down in that comment section. And if you've enjoyed the video, you know what to do. Hit that thumbs up button. That would be very helpful for everything we do here on the channel. Otherwise, that is it from me. A big thank you to you all for watching. We'll see you on the next video. And as always, please make sure that you like, share, comment, and subscribe for more.